And Nova generously said, I think I'm going to yield my time to Art. So we're going to hear from Art, but I'm sure you can steer questions to Nova if you want to.
That's
We've
it.
invited from time to time period people to share faith, life, journey.
Get rid of that.
Old timers or long timers here at College Mennonite know that quite a number of years ago, Art was a member of our pastoral team at College Mennonite Church. I stayed on faculty. Art kind of disappeared from my
Just say got it.
sight as I lost track of his career. And now in the past year, I've gotten to know Art again
No,
in
boy. Where's your
College
sound thing?
Mennonite Church Choir and in
Way up.
Persian Community Chorale. But he's here today to tell us something of what happened in all that span in between as well. So Art, thank you for being willing to share with us.
Good morning. Nova has chosen not to share her story, so I will share mine and weave some of hers in with it. I was born November 12, 1942. Okay.
42.
1942 at Chester County Hospital, Westchester, Pennsylvania, the oldest of four sons. What happened here? That's me on my dad's lap and my next younger brother on my mom's lap. The oldest of four sons to Arthur and Dorothy Smoker. I was named Arthur Emanuel Smoker Jr. My parents and others called me Artie, which I hated as I grew older. There was a woman in our church who looked out over her glasses at me one time when I came home from college. She said, "You may be Art to everybody else, but you'll always be Artie to me." Mom was a registered nurse who worked at the hospital until she gave birth to me. Then she became a full-time mother and homemaker. Dad, with only an 8th grade education, was a tenant farmer. He moved us from farm to farm in the area. My next brothers were each born on a different farm. My parents were members of Fraser Mennonite Church, which was in Lancaster Conference, Mom's home church. Dad had grown up in the Maple Grove congregation in what is now Atlantic Coast Conference. Dad wore a black plain coat, and Mom wore cape dresses, black stockings, and a full covering with white strings on the corners. Dad was restless and wanted to study the Bible, so he sold his farm machinery and animals when I was 4 years old and moved us to Eastern Mennonite College in Harrisonburg, Virginia, to work toward a degree after passing his GED. We lived in a small apartment during the first year, and then he bought a 27 by 28 house trailer and parked it on campus. We lived there for the fall semester of his second year. He developed severe sinus trouble, so we moved back. So we moved back to Pennsylvania. He parked the trailer in the yard of my mother's parents. He went to work in a factory. We lived in the trailer until I was in 2nd grade. Then we moved into Grandpa and Grandma's house and lived there until I was 12. My youngest brother was born while we lived there. Then Dad bought a bungalow from Grandpa across the road, and we lived there. Dad taught me and my brothers to work, doing chores around the house and helping with on the side farm work. He was a very harsh disciplinarian, often whipping us when we disobeyed him. I grew to resent him deeply. Mom was more compassionate, but they had conflict in their marriage too. Dad began classes at Philadelphia Bible Institute, a fundamentalist school, first in day school, then transferring to night school. When I was 7, my parents took us to an evangelistic meeting. When the invitation was given, I raised my hand to receive Jesus as my Savior and Lord. Afterward, the evangelist wouldn't talk with me because he thought I was too young. When we got home, my parents asked me what I had done. I said, I asked Jesus to come into my heart to save me from my sins. It was a genuine decision. I did wait until I was almost 12 to be baptized. I remember our pastor saying during instruction class, boys, we will no longer require you to wear a plain coat, but if you wear a tie, it should be a dark one. When I started 5th grade, my brothers and I were sent to the fundamentalist Delaware County Christian School, similar to Elkhart Christian School, where we remained 5 years. We were poor, and my parents could no longer afford the tuition. My brothers went back to public schools, and I went to Christopher Dock Mennonite High School. It went off.
Sorry, I'm having a little trouble here.
For my last 3 years, I boarded with an older couple in a town near the school for the first year, and then bought an old car to drive the 25 miles back and forth for the last years. I enjoyed my time at CD. I became part of a boys' quartet, and we were called after our junior year for a summer of VS in Alberta, Canada. Singing in churches around the conference, teaching summer Bible school, and helping pastors with chores. During my senior year, I decided that rather than going to Eastern Mennonite College, I would go to Goshen College. My math and German teacher called me into his office and told me to sit down. He said, Arthur, of all of my students, I would have thought you would be the last to go to Goshen College.
Oh, yeah, there's.
School, the quartet, two of us with flat tops.
They want to know who it is.
I'm on the left. Rodney Godshaw, who spent a year here, is next, then Stan Godshaw and Ron Aldifer. I also got pushback from the pastor of a first cousin of Mom's. He said to me, Art, if you go to Goshen College, you'll lose your faith. I replied, Cousin John, if I lose my faith at Goshen College, I guess it wasn't worth much to begin with. Before I went to college, I spent the summer in VS at Rocky Mountain Mennonite Camp, where I joined other staff in serving as a cabin counselor for juvenile, delinquent, and emotionally disturbed kids who came for a week at a time from Denver. That was a good but challenging experience. A highlight was taking campers on a hike to the top of Pikes Peak on the last day of camp. I started at Goshen College in the fall of 1961. Dean of Women, Viola Good, asked me to join a committee to plan a freshman social. I sat across the circle from Nova Jean Wingard and was captivated by her smile and flashing blue eyes. But I was dating a girl who was a senior at CD. I was later chosen as class president. I intended to enter pre-med, but when I met with Russ Lichty, thank you, Marge, to review my pre-entrance test scores, he told me my strengths were in the humanities rather than math and science. He said I would have to study all the time and would not be able to participate in anything else. That threw me into a tailspin. I got depressed and thought of quitting college and going home. My girlfriend came to visit over Thanksgiving and we broke up. I took some courses in elementary education. Then sociology professor Howard Kaufman told me that elementary education is a good field and that after teaching for a time, I could go into administration. He also said that I should perhaps consider going into secondary education. I loved history, so I prepared to teach high school history and social studies. I started dating Nova in January of our freshman year. I sang with her in college choirs all 4 years. She was majoring in elementary education. During 3 summers, I worked at Laurelville Mennonite Camp as a boys counselor and lifeguard, and then as director. Oh, the changes of children and junior high camps. I also worked with children's activities during family camps. Nova served as a counselor in girls' camps too. I visited her family several times at their home in Holsapple, Pennsylvania, 10 miles south of Johnstown during our dating years. We became engaged in our senior year. During my sophomore year, I roomed with Samuel Toye, a foreign exchange student from Lagos, Nigeria, broadening my worldview. And during my senior year, I edited the Record newspaper and did student teaching at Penn High School. One day, Professor of Religion Norman Krauss stopped me on the sidewalk and told me about a Rockefeller Foundation Theological Fellowship program that provided full expenses for a first year in any accredited seminary in North America. For someone who was willing to explore going into pastoral ministry but was not currently planning to do so. He asked if he could nominate me. I turned him down, saying I had no intention of going into pastoral ministry. Nova and I planned to go into teaching. But a few weeks later, I got a letter from the Rockefeller Foundation stating that I had been nominated by Dwight Y. King, who had graduated the year before and was studying with a fellowship at Harvard Divinity School. I was angry. Why had he not asked my permission before nominating me? Then the thought came that perhaps God was trying to tell me something. So I applied, was interviewed, and was awarded a fellowship. I knew that J. Lawrence Burkholder was on the faculty at Harvard Divinity School, so with Nova's permission, I applied there and was accepted. Just prior to our commencement in 1965, Nova flew to Boston to interview for a teaching job at a school about 20 miles from Cambridge. She was hired as a 4th grade teacher. She flew back to Pittsburgh Airport and was picked up by her parents and brother in a new car her parents had bought for her graduation and our wedding. On their way home, the car was hit broadside by 3 drunk teenagers and totaled. They spent commencement weekend in the hospital. Her dad had a broken hip and could not walk until the end of July, so it was a good thing that we had planned our wedding for August. I spent the summer at Laurelville and then went to Nova's home to get ready for the wedding. We bought a new car with the other driver's insurance settlement. We were married August 7, 1965, at Thomas Mennonite Church. Nova's father was able to walk her down the aisle. We spent our 1-week honeymoon at a place called Farm on the Hill in the Pocono Mountains, which was advertised in Mennonite journals. We have enjoyed over 58 years of life together. We've had our ups and downs, to be sure, but have become good partners. Nova, you are the love of my life. After our honeymoon, we spent a bit of time with Nova's family, then loaded our belongings into a small U-Haul trailer and drove east to spend a few days with my parents. Then we drove to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and moved into a small efficiency apartment. Dad was not happy with my going to Harvard. In fact, they visited over Thanksgiving, and I had a close friend, and I told Dad, don't get involved in theological discussions. But soon he started sussing Bob out. And when Bob and Gail left, he said, son, let's get down on our knees and pray. I said, Dad, this is my house. I will pray with you, but I'm not getting down on my knees. The year at Harvard Divinity School expanded my worldview. Lawrence Burkholder was on sabbatical at Cambridge, England, so I did not get to experience him there. The dean of students tried to convince me to stay all 3 years, but Ross Bender, dean at Goshen Biblical Seminary, wanted me to come study there. I decided to do so, believing that if I were to serve in the Mennonite church, I needed to study in an Anabaptist Mennonite context. So we moved back to Goshen after spending the summer at Laurelville. Nova taught sixth grade at Middlebury Elementary School during my 2 years of study. I earned my Bachelor of Divinity degree in 1968. Nova and I were in conversation with MCC about spending time in the Teachers Abroad program in Africa, since Nova did not want to become a pastor's wife. But the leader of Mennonite General Conference told me the church was calling me to become church-wide secretary for youth ministry. I'd been serving on the church-wide Mennonite Youth Fellowship cabinet for 5 years. After receiving encouragement from people from whom I took counsel, Nova and I agreed that I accept the call. We moved to Pittsburgh so Nova could take a year to earn her master's degree in elementary education, and I drove to Scottsdale, where youth ministry was part of Mennonite Commission of Christian Education under Mennonite General Conference. That's J.J. Hostetler on the left. Forget the name of my secretary. Rachel Fisher, Howard Zaire, myself, and my secretary. Pardon? Yvonne Wolfer was my secretary. Yeah.
And I don't think
And the second, oops, I just. My work in youth ministry took me all over the United States and Canada, offering counsel to district conference youth leaders, speaking in Mennonite high schools, serving as camp pastor in church youth camps, helping lead congregational youth leader training events. And meeting with youth groups. With Nova's help, I coordinated two church-wide youth conventions. John and June Yoder were part of the staff for the first one. During those years, I confessed to Dad on a visit that I had been angry with him for years because of his harsh discipline and told him I was sorry. He asked me to forgive him. I did, and we were reconciled. Nova and I had difficulty having children. Nova had 2 miscarriages while we were in Scottsdale, the first of a set of twins, a boy and a girl, in the 5th month, and the second a girl in the 6th month. Her pediatrician did not think she had an incompetent cervix. After 4 years in Scottsdale, the Mennonite offices were moved to Goshen in 1972, where youth ministry became part of the new Mennonite Board of Congregational Ministries, chaired by Ross Bender. We bought a house on South 15th Street. We started attending and became members of College Mennonite Church. Nova went to see Dr. Willard Crable to take care of an issue from the second miscarriage, and he told her she had an incompetent cervix. She got pregnant again and lost a boy at 15 and a half weeks. We tried again, and this time Dr. Crable installed a cerclage around the cervix. Nova gave birth to a son, Chad, in 1974. What a day of celebration that was. Because my youth ministry work required me to travel a third of the time, I decided that it was time to step away so I could spend time to be present as father to our son. I soon got a call from John A. Lapp, Goshen College Dean, inviting me to join the Bible religion faculty to spend half time leading a new program called Living Inquiry into Faith and Experience, or LIFE, where students would take half their course load for a year, living communally and taking a 4-hour seminar based on their faith questions. The other half time, I worked with Norman Kraus in a program called the Center for Christian Discipleship, which planned weekend seminars for Mennonites in Indiana and surrounding states. The LIFE program lasted only 2 years because not enough students enrolled. So I spent a year leading campus ministry. I also served on the CMC board as an elder. Then in 1977, when Eugene Herr resigned as associate minister, CMC called me to take his place, working with Christian education and pastoral care. Nova agreed because I would not be a lead pastor. I was ordained that year. In 1978, Nova gave birth to Erica, so that completed our family. I was not entirely happy in my role at CMC, so I resigned in 1979, not knowing what I would do next. I was soon contacted by leaders of an emerging church, West Goshen Fellowship, started by Waterford Mennonite Church, to deal with their overflow. They issued an invitation to all the other Mennonite churches in the area for others to come. They rented a space in the Mennonite Mutual Aid building on the north side of Goshen. I accepted a call to serve as their first full-time pastor. The congregation soon purchased an old German Baptist meeting house on Berkey Avenue. We moved there after the building was remodeled and an addition added. It did not take me long to realize that this new congregation had attracted persons representing four streams: traditional Mennonite, radical Anabaptist, evangelical, community church, and charismatic. The evangelical and charismatic folks thought I should be going out into the community, witnessing to people and inviting them to church. I told them that I felt it was their responsibility to practice friendship evangelism with their friends and neighbors. I spent over 9 years prayerfully working with the elders and congregation to develop a common vision and purpose, but it did not happen. I even entered a doctoral of ministry program at Fuller Seminary, focusing on church growth. When I talked about our problems with one of my professors, he told me I should resign as I was getting nowhere. After praying about it, I did so, not knowing what I would do. We left Berkey Avenue in 1989 and returned to CMC. I soon went into such a deep depression that I could not think of looking for another ministry. I went for counsel to Walter Drudge here at CMC and on the GC faculty. He referred me to psychiatrist Otto Clausen at Oaklawn. So I spent 2 years in psychotherapy and also in spiritual direction with Gene Herr at the Hermitage. I also participated in an Emotions Anonymous group, which seemed to me more like church than the church. One morning, as I was praying, it felt like my prayers were not even going above the ceiling. I was so desperate that I cried out, "God, go to hell." I thought I would be struck dead, but instead I felt a strange warmth surrounding and filling me. I felt the love of God, and that encouraged me. That was my hitting a bottom moment. I also did a lot of work remodeling and adding an addition to our house. All of that helped me recover. Then I applied for a position in the church relations department at what is now Mennonite Board of Missions in 1991 and spent 3 good years there. In the 3rd year, Berkey Avenue's new pastor came to visit me and asked how I was doing. I told him there was still a hole in my heart because things between the congregation and me had not been resolved. He arranged for me to meet with the Berkey Avenue elders. I talked with them about how I had been hurt, and they talked with me about how they had been hurt too. We met again 6 months later and decided to plan a Sunday evening service of remembering, confessing, and moving on. We prepared a joint litany of confession. I prepared my statements, they prepared theirs, and we jointly modified the litany. I will never forget that service. As we shared the litany of confession, I felt a great weight lift from my heart and experienced a real sense of relief and joy. A few months later, I was called to be lead pastor at North Goshen Mennonite Church. We spent 11 and a half good years there. I enjoyed relating with the youth and sharing ministry with 2 assistant pastors. I created a pastoral visiting team to assist in visiting older members at Greencroft. Chad had graduated from GC in 1996 and married Britt Kaufman and went to medical school at Indiana University. I did have to face one growing issue in the church. A few more conservative members wanted me to preach against homosexuality and same-sex relationships. I declined, saying that I believe God's love extends to all persons. A couple of folks left the church as a result. A bilingual family from Guatemala began attending and invited other Hispanics to come. Associate Pastor Jerry Wittrig began leading an adult class in Spanish. We purchased headphones and a member began translating the service into Spanish. We started having scripture read in both Spanish and English. I took a couple of courses at AMBS and earned my Master of Divinity degree in 2000, the same year Erica graduated from GC. As I approached age 65, I decided that I wanted to prepare for interim pastoral ministry, so I took a 2-year course with the Interim Pastoral Ministry Network. In early 2005, it's Chad and Britt's wedding. Now I've got a few things confused here. In early 2005, I announced my resignation and listed my name as an interim pastor with Mennonite Church USA. And lo and behold, I received a call from 125-member Fraser Mennonite Church, my home congregation, for a 2-year term as interim pastor. We sold our house and moved to Fraser after 33 and a half years in Goshen. I returned to Fraser Mennonite after being away 40 years. I was given 2 main tasks: to help the congregation grieve over the departure of a beloved pastor who left after 17 years, and help the congregation come to agreement on adding an addition to the building with an elevator to the basement and additional classrooms. For the first task, I visited every household in the congregation, inviting them to talk about what they appreciated about their former pastor and their feelings about his leaving. In the second task, I learned that the congregation had been trying for 10 years to agree on the building project. Most members were ready to build, but 2 couples wanted only to build the elevator. The congregation voted by consensus, which to them meant 100%. I introduced a process that John Cobb of Leroy Troyer and Associates had used with us at Berkey Avenue Fellowship. Everyone was given a paper ballot with yes, no, and a place to write comments. Votes were cast and counted. If the vote was less than 50%, it failed. If it was above 50 but less than 80, all statements were read. Votes were cast again until the yeses reached 80%. Then consensus was called. The congregation agreed to this process. The first vote came in at more than 80%. The 2 opposing couples protested and ended up leaving the church. I visited with both, and we parted ways on good terms. Funds were raised which exceeded what was needed. The addition was completed before the end of my assignment, and the congregation rejoiced. In summer 2007, we moved to Mars Hill, North Carolina, 20 miles north of Asheville, to be close to son Chad and his family. Chad was working in family medicine 20 miles away in Burnsville, thus we could spend time with his and Britt's children. Our daughter was in Guatemala City, Guatemala, with her husband, Edgar Silva, who had been her teacher when she went to Guatemala to study Spanish. Soon after our move, I was diagnosed with atrial fibrillation. A variety of treatments failed. Beginning in 2011, I had 2 catheter ablations. Without the cardiologist realizing it, the second one damaged the pulmonary vein opening to my right lung. Months later, when that was discovered, I had to have open heart surgery in August 2012 to repair the vein opening. I had lost half of my right lung capacity. The surgeon was able to correct the AFib, but disconnected the atria from the ventricles, so a 2-lead pacemaker was implanted. Thankfully, I have recovered fully and enjoy mostly good health. We attended Asheville Mennonite Church, a member of Virginia Mennonite Conference, and I was asked to serve as interim pastor, which I did for about 9 months. They called a new pastor after I cautioned them not to because I was concerned about his qualities. Some of his qualities. He seemed to be authoritarian, wanting to rule from top down. When I asked the conference about other interim pastor possibilities, I was invited to serve half-time as district minister in the Tennessee, Carolina, Kentucky district of VMC, replacing a man who was retiring. This meant visiting each of the churches in the district about once a quarter and leading district council meetings 3 times a year. I served for 5 years until 2013. I was soon called to serve half-time as conference minister for Gulf States Mennonite Conference with churches in Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas. I made a 2-week trip to the area once a quarter to meet with each of the congregations and their pastors. I served for 4 years until 2012. The churches are all in the Bible Belt, so I had to deal with quite conservative worldviews. A key issue had to do with same-sex relationships. Funny how that keeps cropping up. I was confronted by the pastor in the Gulfport, Mississippi congregation for being too soft on the issue. I had the denominational minister for Gulf States Conference mediate between us. But by and large, I developed warm relationships with the pastors in their congregations. In 2008, Erica and Edgar came from Guatemala to live with us against Edgar's wishes, but he gradually adjusted. He was able to get a job teaching Spanish at Asheville Christian Academy, and Erica got a job working with Spanish-speaking child care workers. Edgar got his degree in Spanish at Mars Hill University and a master's degree in Romanic languages from Appalachian State. Notice I say Appalachian, not Appalachia. We were corrected on that. Erica got her social work master's degree from the University of North Carolina. They later bought a house in West Asheville and 2 children joined their family. In 2012, I ran into an issue at Asheville Mennonite. 2 retiring couples moved to the Asheville area. One I knew from my time at Goshen Biblical and Mennonite Biblical Seminaries. The other was a Mennonite retiring professor of French at a Presbyterian college. Talking with them after their first Sunday visit, both said they would not return. Nova and I talked with them, and we decided that maybe it was time to explore forming a new Mennonite fellowship in Asheville. We knew some others who were unhappy with the church. About a dozen folks met at the home of one of them on a Sunday evening, including Rachel Hartzler's son, Joel, who had a restaurant and bar in Asheville. We decided to keep meeting. I had tried to meet with the Asheville elders before our first meeting, but was not successful. When I finally was able to meet with them to talk about our move, I was met with disbelief and anger. They dismissed me as their district overseer, minister. We met Sunday mornings in Joel's bar, the Vault, calling ourselves Mennonite Fellowship of Asheville. A couple of us took turns leading worship. A family from Philadelphia moved into the area and came to worship with us, along with 3 recent GC grads who were looking for work. Rachel Hartzler came to serve for almost a year as interim pastor. We explored becoming a church plant in Central District Conference. But it was not long before we had to disband Sunday morning meetings because the Philadelphia couple moved back to Philly, the Goshen grads moved back to Goshen, and a couple of other families moved away. So we held monthly potlucks in our homes. Nova and I began attending First Presbyterian Church in Burnsville with Chad, Britt, and their children, and we were received as members. We were also received as associate members at Knoxville Mennonite Church, 2 hours to our west, to retain relationship with the Mennonite Church. We called ourselves Mennonitarians. I was called to serve 2 3-year terms as a deacon at First Pres, which involved visiting housebound members and members whose spouses had died. I did occasional worship leading and preaching. I also participated in a Wednesday evening book study group. We visited Knoxville about once a quarter. I did 2 things beyond church relationships. I sang all 16 years during our time in NC with the 100 Voice Asheville Choral Society and participated in a weekly book discussion with a Reformed Jewish group in Asheville. Most interesting experience. A few other Christians were also part of the group. In 2021, Nova and I and Erica became aware that a Spanish teaching job was opening at Bethany Christian High School. We encouraged Edgar to apply. He did and was accepted. So they sold their house and moved to Goshen in the summer of 2022. Their 2 children are in 4th and 2nd grade. Erica got a job as a social worker in an Elkhart System Elementary School. This year, all of Chad and Britt's children are at Goshen College. Oops. This year, all 3 of Chad and Britt's children are at Goshen College, so we sold our house in July and moved to Greencroft. Why is it going off? And moved in Greencroft on July 28. Chad and Britt plan to move back to the area at the end of summer 2025. That's a family picture that I wanted to show. That's our family. He will replace Dr. Boytz, who will be retiring in New Paris. We have returned to CMC and have become members. We're happy to participate with you all in the Sojourners class. I participate in the prayer choir and the church choir and sing with the Goshen Community Chorale. I've also been appointed to the Greencroft Spiritual Life Committee. It's good to be back in Goshen after 18 years away and to reconnect with family and friends and make new ones. Yes. Anybody have questions or shock or surprise? Yes, Mark.
Are your brother's relationship with your dad? How did that turn out? Was it like?
The 3 oldest of us were born close together, and Dad treated all of us basically the same. The second one was really a rebel. We were a dysfunctional family, which I learned from David Augsburger, means the first child is a perfectionist. That's me. The second is a rebel. The third is a clown, which was my brother Emerson. And the 4th is a lost child. My 4th brother came along 7 years after the 3rd. He received a lot better treatment than the other 3. But my second brother really made up with Dad and lived in the same area that they did. And so really helped to take care of Mom and Dad in their declining years. So there was reconciliation in the family. And I must say, Dad simply laid on us what he had received from his father. And I said, I am not going to repeat that. And decided that I would use iMessages and other forms of communicating with their children, timeouts in the bedroom rather than spankings and whippings.
Comment here.
With development about, did you have anything to do with the development of the outspoken bicycling and?
No, I didn't. That was
Okay.
Terry Burkhalter.
Okay,
Although I accompanied one group when they went on a trip to Iowa and Nebraska
okay.
for a couple of weeks. That was a very, very
Yeah.
good experience.
That was such a formative
Yeah.
program for me
Ah,
when I was in teenage years. So I'm grateful for that.
yeah. That happened during my time.
Terry and Sandy were just at our house. Oh, really? Thank him for it.
I'm wondering if you were reading parent effectiveness
Yes.
training.
That's why I got the iMessages thing.
Uh-huh.
And I used that in youth leader training. In fact, Jake Pauls from the GC side and I wanted to write a manual for Mennonites, but the PET people wouldn't allow us to do that.
Mm-hmm. Do you, even as we speak, feel that there's a concept in parent effectiveness training that would be suitable to use church-wide in the church as we relate as members, and what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, yes. Listening to each other rather than judging, rather than saying, I disagree with you.
Mhm.
Rather, I hear you say before I say what I want to say, which helps to calm emotion and help people to
Right.
converse with one another.
Thank you.
I just read a book by David Brooks a couple months ago, and he sounds like you've got his technique down. Or he has yours.
Thank you. Were any of you shocked when I said I told God to go to hell? Absolute desperation.
We have some of that in the Psalms, cursing God. So
Yes.
you were
Yeah.
you were with the psalmist in that. And I just want to say it was a joy being a pastor for Art and Nova for it was 6 months
Was it
that I
6
was there
months?
in Nashville.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was quite the experience with the vault, the bar, which my son was helped to finance.
Right. My son Joel and Chad have been lifelong
Yes,
friends
from
and
the time they were little kids.
continue to be. I have a story, if I may, about having communion in the bar. So the first time I was living with Joel and his wife Tara, and the first time that we were getting ready for communion, as I was processing, how we will do this. Shall I just speak louder? Oh.
Go ahead.
So I said, I wonder if we have any recovering alcoholics in the group, because if we do, then we can't serve wine. And my son said, you can't serve wine in the bar. It's illegal. It's illegal to serve alcohol on Sunday mornings in North Carolina. So we use grape juice. The last time that I was there, I said, could we use the shot glasses for the grape juice?
Anyone else? Comment? Art and Nova, thank you so much for sharing openly. And it's a pleasure to have you as part of Sojourner's class. Thank you all.